Dylan. Because Dylan's thing was like, "Don't ask me what it means, man. I wrote it. I don't know what it means. What do you think it means?" He was just constantly going. Bob Dylan kept her name secret for 60 years. But now, at 83, he's finally talking. He first met her in 1963. He wrote his most famous songs about her, and after she left him, he was never the same. Even his closest friends didn't know the truth. Dylan's mind-blowing confession explains everything: the motorcycle crash, the born-again phase, and why he disappeared at the height of his fame. Bob Dylan was born as Robert Allen Zimmerman on May 24, 1941, in Duluth, Minnesota. His parents, Abram and Beatrice, were part of a small Jewish community. When Bob was 6, his father got polio. The family moved to Hibbing, a cold mining town where his mother had grown up. It was a tough place, full of iron workers and freezing winters. The cold, the quiet, and the sound of foghorns from nearby Duluth shaped Bob's early thoughts. He was a quiet boy with asthma, often lost in his own world. His family's roots went back to Ukraine and Lithuania, and that mix of history and hardship would later show up in his music. Things changed when Bob first heard rock and roll on the radio. He was about 10 when he discovered Elvis Presley and Hank Williams. The music hit him hard. He said Hank's voice felt like an electric shock. That feeling pushed him to sit at his family's piano and start playing by ear. He had a natural gift. He didn't need sheet music. He just listened and played. His chords were strange but powerful, and people noticed. His family owned local movie theaters, so Bob watched a lot of music performances on screen. By 14, he switched to guitar and started forming bands. He was obsessed with Little Richard, not just for the music, but for the wild outfits and stage presence. Bob wanted to be just like him. By high school, Bob was fully into music. He started a band called the Golden Chords and played loud, fast rock and roll. At one school talent show, they played so loud that the principal supposedly cut off the microphone. That moment became part of Dylan legend, even if some bandmates later said it didn't happen exactly like that. Still, Bob's loud, rebellious energy left a mark. His high school yearbook even said his goal was to join Little Richard. He wasn't kidding. Even back then, Bob had a strange habit. He made things up about himself. He told classmates he was an orphan from New Mexico. None of it was true, but he liked creating stories. When he moved to Minneapolis in 1959, the lies got bigger. He told people all kinds of made-up tales. In one interview, he joked about losing his true love, becoming a drunk, working as a Chinaman, and getting tuberculosis. It was all nonsense, but it was part of his act. He even used fake names like Elston Gunn. Bob wasn't just playing music. He was building a character. He'd seen musicians and even wrestlers do it. He understood that being a performer meant having a story, even if it wasn't real. That same year, Bob enrolled at the University of Minnesota, but school didn't interest him. He moved into a small apartment above a drugstore in Dinkytown, a place full of students, poets, and political misfits. There, he found what he was really looking for. He played at local coffee houses for just a couple of dollars a night, sometimes getting fired for asking for more. It was in one of those small venues that he first introduced himself as Bob Dylan. No one's sure where the name came from. Some say it was inspired by the poet Dylan Thomas. Others say it was from a cowboy on a TV show. Either way, the name stuck. In Dinkytown, someone handed Bob a book, Woody Guthrie's autobiography, Bound for Glory. That book changed everything. Bob stopped playing electric guitar and picked up an acoustic. He started writing songs that sounded more like folk and protest than rock and roll. By the end of 1960, he was done with college. He packed up and left Minnesota for good. In the freezing cold of January 1961, a 19-year-old Bob Dylan stepped off a bus in New York City with a guitar, a suitcase, and a dream. He had just driven nearly 24 hours straight from Minnesota through brutal winter weather, all for one reason. He wanted to meet Woody Guthrie. Guthrie had been Dylan's hero ever since he read Bound for Glory, the book that told the story of a young man chasing music and meaning. Now, Guthrie was sick, living in a psychiatric hospital in New Jersey, slowly fading from Huntington's disease. But Dylan still made the trip, and somehow, even in that quiet hospital room, he got to sing for the man who shaped his vision of music. Guthrie, barely able to speak, handed Dylan a note that said, "I ain't dead yet." That moment stuck. Dylan went home and wrote Song to Woody. It was one of just 2 original songs on his first album. He borrowed Guthrie's melody from 1913 Massacre to write it, because that's what folk singers did. They passed things down. Just a few months later, Dylan got his first real shot. Columbia Records' John Hammond saw something in him that others didn't. Most people at the label thought Dylan was a mistake. They called him Hammond's Folly. But Hammond had found stars before. Billie Holiday, Aretha Franklin, and he wasn't going to back down now. He signed Dylan to Columbia in October 1961. Dylan didn't have a lawyer, didn't need one, he said. I would have signed anything. The recording sessions were fast and cheap, just $402 across 3 afternoons. But it wasn't easy. Dylan couldn't stay on the microphone, popped every P, hissed every S, and hated doing second takes. I can't sing the same song twice in a row, he told them. That stubbornness didn't help his first album, which barely sold 5,000 copies in its first year, but Hammond believed, and he was right, because those 5,000 copies were just the beginning. Around the same time, Dylan met someone who would change everything. Suze Rotolo. She was young, smart, beautiful, and deeply political. Her parents had been members of the Communist Party. She grew up around protest and activism. Dylan was drawn to her energy immediately, and by early 1962 they were living together. Suze opened his world. She introduced him to poetry, foreign films, avant-garde theater, and above all, politics. With her, he started to see beyond just songs. He started to see purpose. Songs like Masters of War and The Death of Emmett Till came out of that influence. So did one of his most iconic images, the 2 of them walking arm in arm on the cover of the freewheeling Bob Dylan. They looked like any young couple in love. But inside, the pressure was growing. Dylan's fame was rising. Their personalities clashed. In 1964, it was over. The love that helped shape his voice couldn't survive the storm it helped create, but the village, Greenwich Village, was still there. It had become the center of the folk music universe. Every night, coffee houses buzzed with guitars and voices. Dylan played at Gertis Folk City, Café Wa, The Bitter End, all the places that mattered. It was a rough life. Tiny coal departments, cheap food, borrowed sweaters, but it was magic. You could walk down McDougal Street and hear the future in every doorway. Performers watched each other, learned from each other, competed, and collaborated. That pressure made Dylan sharper, faster, more fearless. It also made him stranger. Dylan started building his own legend. In interviews, he told stories that were wild and completely untrue. One time he told Playboy that he started singing rock and roll after losing his one true love, playing cards, becoming a Chinaman in Phoenix, and waking up in a pool hall. He claimed he once lived with a 13-year-old girl and worked as a before model for Charles Atlas. When the interviewer asked if all that led to rock music, Dylan replied, "No, that's how I got tuberculosis. None of it was real, but all of it sounded right." He didn't want to be Robert Zimmerman from Minnesota. He wanted to be Bob Dylan, whoever that was, so he made it up as he went. Even as the stories got weirder, his songs got sharper. In 1962, he wrote The Death of Emmett Till. The next year came The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, a song that stunned listeners with its calm, brutal truth. Hattie was a black woman killed by a rich white man. The killer got 6 months. Dylan didn't just point fingers. He told the whole story. The people, the system, the silence. It wasn't just protest anymore. It was poetry. By the summer of 1963, the world was starting to notice. Dylan played the Newport Folk Festival, the biggest stage for folk music. He was just 22, but already the crowd knew his name. He took the stage in a faded army shirt and sang Blowin' in the Wind with Joan Baez, Heat Seeger, and the Freedom Singers. Then came We Shall Overcome. The crowd felt it. Billboard magazine called it the most powerful moment of the festival. Everyone could see it. Dylan was no longer just part of the scene. He was leading it. His relationship with Joan Baez was part of that rise. She was already famous when they met, but she believed in him, brought him on stage, sang his songs, and helped him climb. By 1963, they were partners on stage and off. Together, they sang at the March on Washington right before Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. But fame has a price. In 1965, during Dylan's UK tour, he brought Baez along but wouldn't let her perform. She felt abandoned, heartbroken. When he married someone else just months later, it was over. Baez would write songs about the pain, especially Diamonds and Rust. Then came The Times They Are A-Changin'. The title alone was a message. Released in 1964, it spoke to a country in shock. JFK had just been killed. Civil rights protests were spreading, and war loomed in Vietnam. Dylan knew what he was doing. He wrote it like an anthem. "Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call." A friend once asked, "What is this shit?" Dylan shrugged. "It's what people want to hear." It worked. The song reached across generations, across oceans. It hit number 9 in Britain. Critics called it timeless. Even as the years passed, the lyrics found new meaning for every generation that heard them. That same year, Dylan started changing again. This time, from the inside out, he took LSD, started reading Rambo. His songs turned surreal. He no longer wanted to point fingers. He wanted to paint pictures with words. During a road trip in early 1964, he wrote Chimes of Freedom, a song that didn't follow any straight path. It just flowed. In June, during one night of recording, he drank wine and recorded 14 songs in 3 hours. That became another side of Bob Dylan, a clear sign that his protest era was ending. What came next would change rock music forever. In 1965, Bob Dylan shook the music world. He released Bringing It All Back Home, and it wasn't just another folk album. The first half blasted through with electric instruments, guitars, drums, a full band. It opened with Subterranean Homesick Blues, and just a few seconds in, you knew something had changed. Folk fans were confused. This was the guy who once sang with only an acoustic guitar and a harmonica. Now, he was tearing into electric rock, but Dylan knew exactly what he was doing. The second half of the album stayed acoustic, But the lyrics had grown darker, sharper, stranger. It was like he was showing everyone two sides of himself, one foot in the past, the other already sprinting into the future. And the final track, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, felt like a goodbye, not just to a lover, but maybe to the entire folk scene that had tried to hold him back. Then came Like a Rolling Stone, 6 minutes long. That was unheard of for a single. Record executives hated it. Radio stations didn't want to play it. It was too long, too raw. But something strange happened. A copy of the song ended up being played at a New York club one night, and the crowd lost it. They begged the DJ to play it again and again until the record was worn out. The next morning, radio stations were calling, begging for copies. Even though DJs had to flip the vinyl halfway through just to play the whole thing, people didn't care. The lyrics hit like a punch. The organ whined behind Dylan's voice, and it felt endless in a good way. Paul McCartney said it sounded like it could go on forever. Frank Zappa even joked he wanted to quit music after hearing it. That's how powerful it was. Just days later, Dylan walked on stage at the Newport Folk Festival. He wore black leather, boots, and an attitude. People thought he was going to strum a few gentle songs. Instead, he plugged in, backed by electric guitar and organ. He ripped into Maggie's farm, and the crowd exploded. Some cheered, others booed. People were crying. Pete Seeger supposedly yelled he wanted to cut the power cables with an axe. That moment, Dylan going electric in front of a sea of confused and furious folk fans, became legend. After just 3 songs, he walked off stage. Then, as if to calm the storm, he came back alone and played 2 acoustic songs. But the damage, or maybe the evolution, was done. He wouldn't return to Newport for another 37 years. The organ that gave like a rolling stone, its haunting sound almost didn't happen. A 21-year-old guitarist named Al Cooper was just there to watch the recording session. But when the producer stepped out of the room, Cooper quietly slid behind the organ, an instrument he didn't even know how to play. By luck, it was already powered on. He only played when he was sure of the chords, and he stayed quiet when he wasn't. That hesitation created a weird, beautiful delay in the notes. When the producer returned and noticed Cooper at the organ, he laughed. But Dylan liked what he heard and told them to turn the organ up in the mix. Cooper's part stayed on the final version, and just like that, an accidental organ line became iconic. The most dramatic moment came in 1966 in Manchester, England. Dylan was on tour, splitting each show in 2, acoustic first, electric after. Folk fans loved the first half, then came the second. With his band behind him, Dylan dove into electric songs. After one, someone in the crowd shouted just one word, "Judas!" It was brutal, a full-blown accusation. Dylan didn't flinch. He leaned into the mic and fired back, "I don't believe you. You're a liar." Then he turned to the band and snapped, "Play it fucking loud." And they did. Like a rolling stone roared through the hall like thunder. No one forgot that night. For decades, people tried to figure out who had shouted the insult. 2 men claimed it, but no one could ever be sure. That same year, Dylan quietly got married on a break from touring. He wed Sarah Lones under an oak tree in Long Island. It was private. So private that most of his friends didn't even know. Sarah was pregnant, and Dylan wanted the moment to be theirs alone. When people asked him about it, he denied it. It wasn't until months later that a newspaper broke the story. Their relationship was complicated. Sarah had worked as a model and secretary. She met Dylan while he was still connected to Joan Baez and Suze Rotolo, but Sarah was the one he married, even if he kept it secret at first. Around this time, Dylan was also working on Blonde on Blonde, a double album that became one of his greatest achievements. He wanted a sound he described as thin, wild, Mercury. Sessions in New York didn't go well, so he went to Nashville. There, with top-notch session musicians, he recorded most of the album in just a few intense days. They worked into the night, fueled by coffee, adrenaline, and probably more. At one point, Dylan started playing a new song that sounded like a drunken marching band. The producer joked it sounded like the Salvation Army. Dylan asked if they could get one, and they did. That's how the album opener, Rainy Day Women No. 12 and 35, came to life. But all this success came at a cost. The 1966 World Tour was brutal. Every night, Dylan would perform solo at first, then come back with his band for the electric set, and every night, bands would boo, kiss, and walk out. In city after city, the scene was the same. Acoustic cheers, electric outrage. He was exhausted. Robbie Robertson later said Dylan looked like he was falling apart. One night, he almost drowned in a hotel bathtub. Dylan was running on drugs and fumes. After the final show in London, he could barely speak on stage. And then came the crash. On July 29, 1966, Dylan wiped out on his motorcycle near Woodstock. The details are still murky. There was no ambulance, no hospital report. Some think it wasn't as serious as it seemed. Others believe it was serious but hidden. Dylan himself later hinted the crash was a way out, a way to escape the spotlight, the pressure, and maybe the drugs. Whatever the truth, he disappeared from the public eye for a long time. In the months that followed, Dylan found peace in Woodstock. He stayed with his family, chopped wood, walked in the woods with his dog, and made music in the basement of a pink house with the Hawks. That house, known as Big Pink, became the birthplace of a whole new sound. After marrying Sarah Lones in 1965, Dylan focused on building a family. He adopted her daughter, Maria, and together they had 4 more children in just a few years. The man, who once seemed like he might burn out any second, was now walking his daughter to the school bus and spending afternoons writing or painting in peace. His assistant once said he had never seen such a dedicated family man. It was 1969, and Dylan stepped on stage in front of 150,000 people for his first full concert in years. The Beatles were in the crowd. So were Elton John and Jane Fonda. The performance nearly didn't happen. His son Jesse was injured during their trip and had to be hospitalized. Dylan had to fly in at the last minute. Still, he performed in a pale cream suit and delivered a softer, country-inspired sound that surprised many. That night, Dylan wasn't just performing songs. He was showing the world that he had changed. But what came next stunned even his most loyal fans. In 1970, he released an album called Self-Portrait, and it confused just about everyone. The music sounded lazy. The cover looked rushed, and critics tore it apart. One review famously began with, "What is this shit?" Years later, Dylan admitted it was no accident. He had made the album to push people away. He was tired of being idolized, tired of being seen as a prophet, so he gave them something they couldn't love. It backfired. The album went gold anyway, and over time, some even started calling it misunderstood, an early sign that Dylan was always one step ahead of everyone else. 3 years later, he got back together with the band to record a new album called Planet Waves. The sessions were fast and focused, and the result gave Dylan his first #1 album. Then came the tour. It was massive. Millions tried to buy tickets, but only a fraction could. It became the highest-grossing tour in history at the time. But the pressure was building behind the scenes. The band was falling apart. Dylan's marriage was cracking too. He later said, "The moment everything changed was when he started taking painting classes in 1974. Something inside him shifted, and from that point on, Sarah never understood him again." That emotional break spilled into his next album. Blood on the Tracks, released in 1975, felt like Dylan opening a wound. Though he denied it was about his marriage, the pain in the songs told another story. His son Jacob would later say the album was definitely about his parents. Dylan himself admitted there was some truth buried in it. The songs were raw, bitter, and deeply personal. He even re-recorded half the album after his brother gave the first version a lukewarm review. What came out was one of the most powerful breakup albums in music history. Then came the wildest tour of his career. The Rolling Thunder Review wasn't just a tour. It was a traveling show with poets, playwrights, and rock stars. Dylan wore white face paint on stage and invited strangers to join along the way. It was chaotic, spontaneous, and completely unlike anything fans had seen before. He was chasing something bigger than music, something theatrical, symbolic, and personal, and at the center of it all, Dylan was still trying to hold on to his marriage. One night in 1975, Sarah showed up at the studio. They hadn't been doing well, but Dylan saw an opening. He told the band to play, turned to Sarah, and said, "This one's for you." Then he sang Sarah, a song about their life together, with her standing just on the other side of the glass. Everyone in the room was silent. It was raw, it was real, and for a moment it worked. They got back together briefly. Sarah even joined the tour and appeared in Dylan's strange film, Ronaldo and Clara. But the cracks were too deep. Everything collapsed for good in 1977. Sarah came downstairs one morning to find another woman in their house, sitting with Bob and the kids. A screaming match followed. She claimed he hit her. Court documents described erratic behavior and fear. Dylan denied the abuse, but couldn't deny the damage. They went to war over custody, money, and memories. She walked away with half of everything, including rights to many of the songs Dylan had written during their marriage. Part of the deal was that she would never speak about their life together, and she hasn't. Years later, Dylan admitted he wasn't a good husband. He thought it would last forever, but it didn't. Instead, what he left behind was music, soaked in heartbreak and honesty, songs that told the truth even when he tried to hide it. In 1978, during a concert in San Diego, someone threw a small silver cross onto the stage. Dylan picked it up. The next night, in a lonely hotel room in Tucson, he said he felt Jesus physically touch him. He trembled all over. That moment changed him. He became a born-again Christian. Soon he was baptized, took Bible study classes, and released an album full of gospel music. He stopped singing his old protest songs and toured with a set list that was all about faith. Fans were confused. Critics were harsh. But Dylan didn't care, at least not yet. The pushback came fast. At some concerts, people tore up their tickets and walked out when they realized what they'd signed up for. Outside venues, others were begging to sell their $15 tickets for just $5. In between songs, Dylan would preach about the end times and quote Scripture. He told people Jesus was coming back. He warned about war in the Middle East. He wasn't just a singer anymore. He had become a street preacher with a guitar, and it alienated much of his fan base. By 1983, Dylan began to shift again. He released Infidels, an album that moved back toward more familiar ground. It still had some religious themes, but also touched on politics and personal confusion. He worked with Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits after turning down other big names like David Bowie and Frank Zappa. But Dylan, being Dylan, the recording sessions were chaotic. At one point, he played with a tin foil from his sandwich into a microphone just to throw things off. And despite having recorded some incredible songs like Blind Willie McTell, he didn't include them on the album. Still, it did well. Gold in the United States, a top 10 hit in the UK and Norway. Slowly, he was back. Behind the scenes, Dylan was living a secret life. In 1986, he had a daughter with one of his backup singers, Caroline Dennis. They got married in Los Angeles. But nobody knew. Not the press, not the fans, not even most of his friends. They hid it all using a law that let them seal their marriage certificate. The birth certificate didn't even list Dylan as the father. It wasn't until 2001, when a biography came out, that the world found out. Caroline later said they did it to protect their daughter's childhood. They divorced in 1992, but kept the secret until the very end. While his personal life stayed hidden, his career hit rock bottom. His 1986 album, Knocked Out Loaded, was rushed and barely held together. Critics tore it apart. Rolling Stone said it was depressing. Dylan himself admitted he didn't put much effort into it. Things didn't improve much with Down in the Groove in 1988. It sold poorly and was later called his worst album ever. Even the cover was a disappointment. Originally, it was supposed to show a man riding a horse backwards while playing guitar, but the label rejected it. That summed up the whole period. Confused, off track, and full of missed chances. But just when it looked like Dylan was fading out, something unexpected happened. In 1988, he got together with George Harrison, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne to record a quick song. That session turned into a supergroup called the Traveling Wilburys. Each of them took on goofy names and played like they were just having fun, not trying to be legends. It worked. The album they made was a hit. It won a Grammy, and for Dylan it meant something even more. It showed he still had it. He could still create something great, and he wasn't done yet.